I'm taking leaders' questions under Standing Order 36. Agus Morris Ganok, na phone a wuka, Agus Cleland is Shrianta Amma, Goramil Mogov, a Shakta Mary Lou McDonald.
Taoiseach, last night in debate with Sinn Féin's Owen O'Brien, your Minister, Darragh O'Brien, claimed that we do not have a housing emergency. Incredible stuff, Taoiseach. So I would like to share with you just some of the hundreds of people who have been in touch with us in the last 24 hours, victims of the housing emergency. Christopher tells us, I'm living in rental accommodation. I work full-time in the Defence Forces. My partner works part-time as we can't afford full-time childcare. We'll never be able to afford a house with prices this high. I'm at my wit's end. I genuinely have to hold back tears some days out of pure frustration at the state of things. Tracy tells us, I have to take an overdraft so I can pay the mortgage every month. I can't afford oil for heating. We're ripped off. I'm considering moving to New Zealand. Christine's story. I got 6 months' notice to leave after 9 years renting. I have 4 children, all under the age of 10. I've been on the housing list for years. Council tell me there are no houses and to start asking family. I'm so stressed I've had to go on medication. I work hard. I feel so let down. My heart is broken thinking that my children may not have a home. Aoife tells us, myself, my husband and 3 kids have lived with my mother for nearly 5 years now. We make too much money for social housing and way too little to own our own home. Our only hope would be affordable housing. We couldn't afford to rent. We feel like our lives have been on hold for so long now. We pay our taxes, pay our bills. We truly are the working poor and the hidden homeless. Killian is 28. He says, I'm 28 years old, I live in a house share. I have a good job, but at this age I had hoped to own my own place. The house I'm in is overcrowded and it's damp. I hate going home from work, but I've no prospect of finding a better place. I am very much considering moving away for a better life. I know that there are people worse off than me, but my current situation is so depressing. Kate tells this. She says, we're back living with my parents along with 2 children. We're saving for a house, but prices are crazy. We both have good jobs, but we're not massive earners. When my dad was diagnosed with cancer in September, we considered moving out and renting again to give my parents space. 17 applications were sent and not 1 response. My eldest child is so insecure about not having our own house, and it causes huge worry for him and for us. So there you have it, Taoiseach, and this, let it be said, is just a sample, a small sample of the real stories of your collective failure in housing. A father close to tears every day, a mother on medication to cope with the stress, young people feeling depressed, looking to emigrate, children racked with anxiety and fear, families living in a state of panic. There too nach eigandó tíhiachta í seo, ach ní hagan an tuairim sin na fear scale na daoine. The claim made that this isn't a housing emergency is so painfully out of touch with reality, because Taoiseach, if this isn't a disaster, then what is it? If this isn't a social catastrophe, then what is it? And if this isn't a housing emergency, as you claim, well then what is it?
Well, first of all, I have been very consistent in this House in saying repeatedly that housing is the single most urgent and important social issue facing our society at this moment in time. And since this government has come into office, we have focused razor-like on the housing issue. And the evidence is there in terms of the new schemes that have been brought in terms of the construction and so on. I'll deal with that in a moment. But beyond no doubt, this government sees housing as a key priority. And if it's a pillar of the programme for government, and a lot has been done over the last 2.5 years, notwithstanding the lockdowns during COVID-19, of which there were 2, which did have an impact. Coming out of that into the war in Ukraine, the inflationary cycle, which really increased building material costs, but we got to grips with that through the work of Minister McGrath in terms of public tendering and reforming those, giving confidence back to the sector to continue to invest in housing. And we will increase the supply of housing. We are increasing the supply of housing, and the plan is working. And we all accept the challenges for people out there. But the answer is to build more houses, to get supply up, along with a range of other policies. And I've said this repeatedly. I have seen no alternative to housing for all from anybody, from your party or from anybody, through the chair. I just haven't seen it in substance, in detail, in additional recommendations that would go over and above what Minister O'Brien has introduced. And those are the realities. Now, the latest home completion data from the CSO shows the country is well on track in exceeding the Housing for All plan for 2022. So we will go over 24,600. And that towards the end of this year. There was 28,000 homes built in the 12 months to September 2022. 21,000 house completions alone in the first 9 months of this year. And as I said, we hopefully will go over the target that we set ourselves. So the plan is working, but we need to build more houses. We need to build them more quickly. There were more than 16,000 first-time buyers in the past 12 months. I think that's the highest in a long, long time, since 2007, and represents 33% of all house purchases. So house completions, commencements, permissions, home purchases, first-time buyers, mortgage drawdowns are all up to record levels. So we've had the highest housing delivery since 2008, the highest commencements on record, highest planning permissions since 2007, highest number of first-time buyers since 2007, highest number of home buyers since 2008. And we've also pushed very strongly ahead with the social housing. 18,390 new social homes have been added to the social housing stock under this government to Q2 of 2022, and that's including 11,301 new builds. We've brought 5,000 social homes back in to use under the Voids programme, and we're going to review, we're concluding the review, a fundamental overhaul of our planning code, because delivery of housing is key, and the delivery mechanism in terms of objections to housing projects and so on, and the slowness of delivery in many councils over so many years, Devoney Gardens, you name it, all too long, Oscar Traynor, just ridiculous objections and so forth. So the Croí Cónaithe Fund, the 16 acts have been passed in this House. The Minister's brought 16 pieces of legislation on housing through this. We have the cap to rent increases in RPZs of more than 2% per annum.
Thank you.
So there's been an extraordinary burst of activity over the last 2 years, 2.5 years under Minister O'Brien. That cannot be taken from it. It's real and it's substantial.
Highest rents, highest house prices, highest levels of homelessness. That's the reality of your record. So here's Karen. Karen's in her early 20s. She says, with my boyfriend 6 years, living with our parents in a box room. We just want to start our own life. We're just waiting for something to get better. It's so hard. Michael says, we're a working family with 2 children, renting for 21 years. We've been given notice of termination. We have no idea where we're going next. We can't afford to buy, and we can't afford to rent. We're not even eligible for council housing since we're above the threshold. The future is just so unsure. Taoiseach, can I put it to you? Do you accept that this is a catastrophe? Do you accept that we are living through a housing emergency? Because if, like your minister, you do not, that goes a very long way to explain your abject failure in meeting the housing needs of people. So can I ask you the straight question? I've given you just a sample of stories. This is a housing emergency, is it not?
Well, Deputy, I'm not going to play your populist game. I mean, look, Sinn Féin essentially is populist in its approach to issues. I've stated my position on housing. I use my definitions. And I said it's the greatest and most important urgent social problem facing this country. I said that repeatedly. You're not going to put words in my mouth. But what
And
I
you're
would
not
say
going
to
to
you
put
is this:
roofs over
we do
people's
not
heads.
understate, through the chair, we
Okay.
do not understate the seriousness for many people out there.
Your minute.
But I've listened
let-
to the
let-
Deputy, to the Chair, for the last 4 minutes plus. Not one single solution came from the Deputy. Not one single proposal came from the Deputy in respect of this. And when we put forward the first home scheme, for example, opposed again by Sinn
let
Féin,
Taoiseach, please.
when the
Let
various
Taoiseach,
schemes
let
that the,
Taoiseach.
and again this is the same tactic all of the time, through the Chair, that I didn't interrupt the Deputy when the Deputy spoke, but inevitably now that the tactic is to interrupt my good self or others when we're making comments. I have dismissed. There's more. That's more of the populism, endeavouring that this is the classic populist trope
Thank
that
you.
Deputy O'Brien has just
Thank you.
articulated.
Táimid
It
Taran,
absolutely is.
Táimid
Trying to
Taran,
suggest that we
Táimid Buggerai,
are somehow,
Táimid
not empathising with people who are in difficulty with housing. The only way to respond, Deputy, is to build houses.
Taoiseach.
And when you look at Conley,
Taoiseach, we're over
but the Deputy
time.
opposite feels free
we
to
are
oppose.
Over. Táimid ag
feels-
bugga arai go dtí páirtí
I
an
just want to
Loch
make the
Dalgra.
point. Sorry. No, but look, Deputy, you're a serial, the party opposite is a serial opposer to housing all the time. Clonliffe Road being one of them, you know.
The Lascan Corla is now standing for at least a minute. Would you please? I'm not going to continue, so there are interruptions on both sides. If we could, with respect, move on and listen to the Speaker, thank you. Or otherwise, I will not continue. I simply won't.